The dense Siberian forest stretched endlessly, a blanket of white snow and dark pine trees creating an intimidating landscape. Jack Hartley, a 42-year-old wildlife photographer, had been tracking Amur tigers for weeks, hoping to capture rare footage of these magnificent creatures in their natural habitat. His expedition had been challenging, with temperatures dropping to -20 degrees Celsius and visibility often reduced to mere meters. On this particular morning, the crisp air was so cold it seemed to crystallize with each breath. Jack's specialized camera equipment hung around his neck, protected by layers of insulated gear. He moved carefully, his experienced boots leaving minimal trace in the soft snow, understanding that in this environment, silence and stealth were survival skills. Suddenly, a faint sound broke the forest stillness, a low, almost imperceptible whimper that didn't sound like typical wildlife. Jack froze, his senses heightened. Something was different. Something was wrong. Slowly turning towards the sound, he realized he was about to encounter something extraordinary, something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about survival and connection in the wild. As Jack cautiously approached the source of the sound, he realized it was coming from a small clearing partially hidden by snow-laden branches. What he saw made his heart stop. A massive Amur tiger, typically known for its strength and ferocity, was lying partially concealed, visibly injured. The tiger, a male approximately 10 feet long, had a deep gash along its right flank. Blood stained the pristine snow, creating a stark crimson contrast. Jack's wildlife training immediately kicked in. He recognized the wound as likely caused by a poacher's trap, or possibly a confrontation with another predator. The animal's breathing was labored, each exhale creating small clouds of vapor in the freezing air. Most surprising was the tiger's behavior. Instead of displaying aggression, which would be typical for a wounded predator, this animal seemed different. Its eyes, a piercing amber color, were not filled with rage or fear, but something Jack could only describe as a desperate plea. The tiger wasn't preparing to attack. It was watching him with an almost human-like intensity. Jack knew the statistics. Amur tigers were critically endangered, with fewer than 500 remaining in the wild. This particular specimen looked like a mature male in his prime, weighing likely around 450 pounds. Its thick winter coat, normally a magnificent orange and black, was matted with blood and snow. Slowly, Jack reached into his backpack. He carried a basic wilderness first aid kit, primarily designed for human emergencies, but he knew some of its contents might help. Antiseptic wipes, bandages, and a small bottle of iodine could potentially make a difference. The tiger didn't move. It watched Jack's every movement with an almost supernatural calm. Jack had encountered wounded animals before, but never one that seemed so communicative. There was an intelligence in those eyes that went beyond typical animal behavior. As Jack inched closer, he could now see the full extent of the injury. The wound was deep, likely from a steel jaw trap, an illegal hunting method that caused immense suffering. The trap had torn through muscle and was dangerously close to a major blood vessel. Without intervention, this magnificent creature would likely bleed out within hours. Jack's mind raced. Approaching a wounded tiger was potentially suicidal. One swipe from those massive paws could tear him apart in seconds, yet something in the tiger's demeanor suggested it was seeking help, not preparing to attack.
Easy.
Jack whispered, more to himself than the tiger.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
The tiger's ears, which had been slightly flattened, now perked up slightly. Its breathing, while still labored, seemed to become marginally more controlled. Jack knew he was about to make a decision that could either save a rare predator's life or end his own in a moment of fatal miscalculation. Jack Hartley had never considered himself a hero. At 42, he was a seasoned wildlife photographer and conservation researcher who had spent years documenting the remote wilderness of the Russian Far East. He knew these forests intimately, their sounds, their rhythms, their unspoken rules of survival. But nothing in his extensive experience could have prepared him for what was about to unfold on that crisp, bone-chilling December morning. The temperature hovered around -15 degrees Celsius, a typical winter day in the Sikhote Alin mountain range. Jack's breath formed small clouds as he trudged through the snow, his specialized camera equipment carefully packed and protected against the extreme cold. He was tracking a potential migration pattern of Amur leopards, a project he'd been planning for months. His initial reaction when he first heard the unusual sound was pure, unadulterated terror. The low, guttural moan was unlike anything he'd heard before. Not quite a growl, not quite a cry of pain, but something in between that sent immediate chills down his spine. Years of wilderness training had taught him one fundamental rule. In this environment, sound could mean the difference between life and death. Jack's hand instinctively moved to the hunting knife strapped to his belt. He wasn't a hunter, but in these wilderness regions, preparedness was survival. His heart raced, pulse quickening with each step toward the source of the sound. Mountain lions, wolves, and bears were known inhabitants of this region, and an injured predator was potentially the most dangerous creature one could encounter. His mind flashed back to a conversation with a local ranger just days earlier. They had discussed the increasing challenges faced by wildlife in this region: habitat loss, poaching, and the brutal winter conditions that tested even the most resilient species. The ranger had warned him about the increasing desperation of animals struggling to survive. As he moved closer, Jack's professional training battled with his primal survival instincts. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. He knew that sudden movements could trigger an attack response in a wounded animal. His years of wildlife photography had taught him patience and observation. The snow crunched beneath his specialized winter boots, each step creating a soft but distinct sound that seemed amplified in the absolute silence of the forest. Jack's mind raced through potential scenarios. Was this an injured wolf? A bear caught in a trap? The sound was too large, too complex to be a smaller predator. His thermal jacket, designed for extreme conditions, did little to calm the cold sweat forming on his forehead. Fear was a visceral, physical response that no technology could completely suppress. Jack had faced dangerous situations before: close encounters with aggressive wildlife, treacherous mountain terrain, and extreme weather conditions. But something about this moment felt different. The sound came again, a mixture of pain and something else. Was it a plea? Jack had spent years studying animal behavior, and he knew that animals communicated in ways far more complex than most humans understood. But this was something else entirely. His professional detachment began to waver. Whatever was making that sound was suffering, and Jack's years of conservation work had ingrained in him a deep respect for wildlife. Yet the potential danger was immense. One wrong move could mean instant death. As he approached the source of the sound, Jack's hand unconsciously moved to the small emergency beacon in his jacket pocket. If something went wrong, this might be his only lifeline. The forest around him seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Little did Jack know that the next few moments would challenge everything he thought he knew about survival, communication, and the unexpected connections that can form between species in the most extreme circumstances. The forest watched, the wounded creature waited, and Jack Hartley stood at the precipice of an encounter that would change his life forever. As Jack inched closer, the source of the sound gradually came into view. What he saw made him momentarily freeze in disbelief. A massive Siberian tiger lay partially concealed beneath a snow-laden pine, its magnificent orange and black coat now stained with dark, crimson patches of blood. This wasn't just any tiger. This was a fully grown male, easily weighing over 400 pounds, typically a creature of unimaginable power, now reduced to a vulnerable state. The tiger's right hind leg was clearly injured, a deep gash revealing torn muscle and what looked like a potential fracture. Jack's trained eye quickly assessed the wound. This wasn't a clean injury from a natural hunting accident. The jagged edges suggested something more sinister, likely a poacher's trap, a cruel method used by illegal hunters in these remote regions. For several long, breathless moments, man and tiger locked eyes. Jack had photographed these magnificent creatures dozens of times, but never from this proximity. The tiger's gaze was unlike anything he'd encountered before, not filled with rage or immediate threat, but something more complex. There was intelligence in those amber eyes, a depth of understanding that seemed to transcend the typical predator-prey dynamic. Survival instincts battled with professional curiosity. Jack knew that a wounded tiger was potentially the most dangerous animal on the planet. One wrong move could trigger an attack that would end his life in seconds. Yet, something about this creature's demeanor suggested something different. The tiger wasn't preparing to attack. It was watching, almost assessing. Jack's mind raced through his extensive knowledge of Amur tigers. These were not just animals. They were intelligent, complex creatures with intricate social structures. The species was critically endangered, with fewer than 500 remaining in the wild. Each individual was crucial to the survival of the entire population. Slowly, deliberately, Jack lowered himself to a crouching position. His movement was calculated, not a threat, but not submissive either. He spoke softly, using the same tone he'd developed over years of wildlife research.
Easy.
He murmured, his voice low and steady.
I'm not here to hurt you.
The tiger's ears, which had been slightly pulled back in defensive posture, began to twitch. Not in aggression, but in what seemed like curiosity. Jack realized he was experiencing something extraordinary, a moment of potential communication between species that most scientists would consider impossible. He reached slowly into his pack, never breaking eye contact. The tiger tensed momentarily, but didn't move. Jack pulled out a small medical kit and a thermal blanket, standard equipment for wilderness researchers. His mind was already calculating the risks and potential strategies for helping this wounded animal. The injury was severe. Jack could see now that the leg wound was infected, with signs of potential gangrene setting in. In the wild, this would mean certain death for the tiger. Infection moved quickly in these harsh conditions, and without intervention, this magnificent creature would die a slow, painful death. But helping a wounded tiger was no simple task. Jack knew the statistics. More humans were killed by tiger attacks each year than by any other large predator. His entire body was primed with adrenaline, every muscle ready to react in a split second if the tiger's demeanor changed. Something remarkable was happening. The tiger, instead of showing aggression, seemed to be communicating a kind of desperate vulnerability. Its breathing was labored, but its eyes remained locked on Jack with an intensity that suggested more than simple animal instinct. Jack had spent decades studying animal behavior, but nothing in his professional training could have prepared him for this moment. The line between wild predator and potential ally seemed to blur, creating a tension so thick it felt almost tangible. As minutes passed, an unspoken understanding began to form. The tiger wasn't seeing Jack as a threat or potential prey. Something else was happening. A recognition, a plea for help that transcended the typical boundaries between human and wild animal. Jack knew that the next few moments would determine not just his survival, but potentially the survival of this critically endangered creature. One wrong move could mean death for both of them. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Jack's first move was deliberate and calculated. He slowly unzipped his heavy winter jacket, revealing a layer of thick thermal clothing underneath. The tiger watched, its amber eyes tracking every minute movement with an intensity that suggested intelligence beyond mere animal instinct.
I'm going to help you.
Jack whispered, more to himself than to the massive creature. His wilderness first aid training kicked in, a skill honed through years of remote research expeditions. He knew that approaching a wounded predator was exponentially more dangerous than treating a domestic animal. The tiger's labored breathing created small clouds of vapor in the freezing Siberian wilderness. Its injured leg was swollen, the wound looking increasingly infected. Jack recognized the signs of a trap injury, likely an illegal poacher's snare that had torn deep into the animal's muscle. Carefully, Jack pulled out his medical kit. He carried specialized equipment designed for large animal treatment, something most researchers in his field considered essential when working in tiger habitats. Antiseptic wipes, broad-spectrum antibiotics, and sterile bandaging materials were meticulously arranged. The tiger didn't move. This was unusual. Most wounded predators would show aggression or attempt to retreat. Instead, this creature seemed to be making a calculated decision, assessing Jack as a potential source of help rather than a threat. Jack's movements were slow, deliberate. He spoke continuously in a low, steady tone, not words of comfort, but a consistent sound designed to prevent sudden surprises. Each step brought him closer to the wounded animal, his body language communicating non-aggression. When he was within arm's reach, the tiger's muscles tensed. Jack froze, understanding that one wrong move could trigger an immediate attack. The predator could kill him in seconds if it felt threatened. Yet something extraordinary was happening. A communication beyond typical human-animal interaction. The infection was worse than Jack initially thought. The wound showed signs of potential sepsis, a condition that would certainly mean death in the wild. Without intervention, this magnificent creature would die within days. Another tragic loss for the critically endangered Amur tiger population. Slowly, Jack reached into his pack and pulled out a tranquilizer gun, a last resort tool he hoped he wouldn't need to use. The tiger seemed to understand the potential threat, its eyes locked onto the device with an almost human-like comprehension. A critical moment was approaching. Jack would need to make a decision that could determine both his survival and the tiger's chance of recovery. As Jack inched closer, something extraordinary began to unfold. The tiger's eyes, typically fierce and predatory, seemed to communicate a complex emotional landscape that defied typical animal behavior. It wasn't just pain or fear in those amber depths. There was something more profound, almost intelligent. Jack had spent years studying Amur tigers in their natural habitat, but nothing prepared him for this moment. The wounded animal made no aggressive moves, instead producing a low, almost plaintive sound that was neither a growl nor a typical animal vocalization. It was a sound that seemed to bridge the gap between pure animal communication and something more nuanced. His research colleague, Dr. Elena Petrova, had often discussed the complex social structures of Siberian tigers. She documented intricate communication patterns that suggested these animals possessed a level of emotional intelligence far beyond what most scientists believed possible. Jack had always been skeptical, but now, face to face with this wounded creature, he was witnessing something remarkable. The tiger shifted slightly, revealing the full extent of its injury. A deep, jagged wound ran along its rear leg, clearly the result of a poacher's trap. But more than the physical injury, Jack noticed something else. A series of scars that told a story of survival. This wasn't just any tiger. This was an animal that had fought and survived multiple challenges. Unexpectedly, the tiger did something Jack had never seen before. It deliberately positioned itself to expose the wounded leg, almost as if presenting the injury for examination. This was no random animal behavior. This was a calculated action that suggested a level of trust and communication far beyond typical predator-human interactions. Jack's mind raced with possibilities. Years of scientific training battled with the extraordinary moment unfolding before him. He pulled out his satellite phone, wanting to document this encounter, but hesitated. Any sudden movement could break this delicate connection.
What are you trying to tell me?
Jack whispered, knowing how ridiculous the question sounded. The tiger responded with a series of soft vocalizations, a combination of sounds that seemed to convey more than mere animal communication. It was almost as if the creature was trying to explain something, to bridge the communication gap between species. As hours passed, Jack realized this was no ordinary encounter. The tiger showed no signs of aggression, instead displaying a remarkable patience. It seemed to understand that Jack was attempting to help, tolerating his careful approach in a way that defied everything Jack knew about wild predators. The wilderness around them was silent, save for the occasional distant cry of a bird or the soft crunch of snow. Jack's training told him to be cautious, to maintain a professional distance. But something deeper, something more intuitive, was telling him this was a unique moment of interspecies connection. Blood from the tiger's wound had begun to freeze in the extreme cold, creating a stark contrast against the pristine white snow. Jack knew time was critical. Infection in these conditions could be fatal, and the tiger seemed to understand this as well. Its eyes never left Jack, a constant, intelligent gaze that spoke of something beyond mere animal instinct. As the day began to fade and the Siberian winter's early darkness approached, Jack faced a decision that would challenge everything he knew about wildlife, survival, and the mysterious connections that exist between different species. The tiger waited, watching, communicating in a language that transcended words, a silent plea for help that would change both their lives forever. As the hours passed, an extraordinary bond began to form between Jack and the injured tiger. The initial tension slowly dissolved, replaced by a remarkable sense of mutual understanding that defied scientific explanation. Jack carefully approached the animal, his movements deliberate and measured. He had a small medical kit in his backpack, standard equipment for wilderness researchers, and began to assess the tiger's wound. The trap had caused significant damage, a jagged tear running along the animal's rear leg that would certainly become infected without immediate treatment. To his surprise, the tiger remained remarkably calm. Most wild animals would have either fled or attacked when approached by a human, but this creature seemed to recognize Jack's intentions were benevolent. Each time Jack moved closer, the tiger would adjust its position, almost cooperatively, allowing him a better view of the injury.
Easy.
Jack murmured, speaking softly in a tone he'd learned worked with skittish wildlife.
I'm gonna help you.
The tiger's response was equally measured. Its breathing remained steady, eyes locked with Jack's in a gaze that seemed more intelligent than any animal interaction he'd previously experienced. Dr. Petrova's research notes began to flood Jack's mind. Her theories about tiger intelligence suddenly seemed far less far-fetched. As Jack began cleaning the wound, the tiger showed an extraordinary level of patience. Most wild animals would have reacted with fear or aggression, but this creature seemed to understand the healing process. It remained still, only occasionally letting out a soft whimper that seemed more communicative than painful. The wound was complex. Years of working in wildlife conservation had given Jack significant medical skills, but this injury was severe. The trap had not just torn flesh, but had potentially damaged muscle and underlying tissue. He realized this tiger would not survive without comprehensive medical intervention. Communication between them evolved beyond the physical. The tiger seemed to anticipate Jack's movements, shifting slightly to help him work. When Jack needed to apply antiseptic, the animal would turn its leg just so, making the process easier. It was as if they were working together, two intelligent beings with a shared goal of survival. Jack's mind raced with questions. This wasn't a typical human-animal interaction. The tiger displayed an intelligence that suggested something more profound, a level of understanding that challenged everything he knew about wildlife behavior. Its eyes held a depth of emotion that seemed almost human, a mixture of pain, hope, and a strange sense of trust. As night began to fall, Jack faced a critical decision. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and the tiger's condition was precarious. Leaving it meant certain death, but transporting a wounded tiger was no simple task. The nearest research station was miles away, through treacherous Siberian terrain. He radioed his research base, explaining the situation. Dr. Petrova's voice crackled through the satellite phone, her excitement palpable.
Document everything.
She instructed.
This is unprecedented.
The tiger seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. When Jack prepared a makeshift stretcher using his emergency equipment, the animal cooperated in a way that defied typical animal behavior. It allowed itself to be carefully positioned, making movements that suggested an understanding of Jack's intentions. As they began the challenging journey, Jack reflected on the extraordinary connection that had formed. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a profound moment of interspecies communication. The tiger wasn't just a wild animal to be studied, but a sentient being with its own complex emotional landscape. Hours passed. The terrain was unforgiving. Deep snow, treacherous ice, and temperatures that could kill within hours. Jack's training and survival skills were pushed to their absolute limit. The tiger remained remarkably calm, almost as if providing silent support during their challenging journey. By midnight, they had covered half the distance to the research station. Jack's body ached from the exertion, but the tiger's presence provided an unexpected source of motivation. Every time he felt exhaustion creeping in, he would look at the animal, and its steady gaze would reinvigorate his determination. As dawn approached, Jack realized this encounter was more than a simple rescue. It was a testament to the complex, often misunderstood world of animal intelligence, a journey that would challenge scientific understanding and reveal the profound connections that exist between different species. The tiger watched him, a silent companion in their shared struggle for survival, their mutual understanding growing with each challenging step through the unforgiving Siberian wilderness. The moment Jack realized the tiger needed rescue was both terrifying and exhilarating. His years of wildlife research had prepared him for challenging situations, but nothing could have anticipated this extraordinary encounter in the remote Siberian wilderness. The tiger's leg was caught in an illegal poacher's trap, a cruel metal contraption designed to immobilize large predators. Jack could see the intricate network of damage, torn muscle, potential nerve disruption, and a wound that would certainly lead to infection if left untreated. The trap itself was sophisticated, suggesting these weren't amateur hunters, but professional wildlife traffickers operating in the region's most isolated territories. Jack's first priority was stabilizing the animal. His research background with the International Wildlife Conservation Institute had trained him in emergency wildlife medical procedures, but this situation was different. This wasn't a controlled environment or a sedated animal in a research facility. This was a wild, injured predator in its natural habitat. He began by carefully assessing the trap's mechanism. Years of studying anti-poaching techniques had given him intimate knowledge of these devices. This particular trap was designed to cause maximum damage while preventing easy removal. The metal teeth were serrated, creating additional tissue trauma with each movement the tiger made.
I need to approach this systematically.
Jack muttered to himself, pulling out his specialized field kit. The kit contained tools most researchers carried: wire cutters, medical supplies, emergency communication devices, and survival equipment. But this situation would require more than standard protocols. The first challenge was gaining the tiger's trust. Most wild animals would react defensively when approached, especially when injured. But something about this particular tiger was different. Its eyes held an intelligence that seemed to transcend typical animal behavior. It watched Jack with a calculated gaze, almost as if understanding his intentions. Jack's strategy began with creating a safe perimeter. He used branches and his emergency equipment to create a makeshift barrier that would prevent the tiger from further injuring itself while attempting to escape. Each movement was calculated, slow, and deliberate. Communication with the animal became crucial. Jack had learned from indigenous trackers in multiple continents that animals respond to energy and intention. He maintained a calm demeanor, speaking in low, steady tones.
I'm gonna help you,
he said softly, knowing the tiger couldn't understand his words, but might comprehend his intention. The rescue would require multiple complex steps. First, he needed to determine the extent of the injury. The trap had not just caught the tiger's leg, but had potentially caused significant internal damage. Jack's medical training kicked in. He would need to assess blood loss, potential shock, and the risk of infection. His satellite phone provided limited connectivity, but he managed to contact Dr. Elena Petrova, his research supervisor back at the Conservation Institute. Her expertise in large predator rehabilitation would be critical.
The trap looks like a modified version we've seen from the Ural Mountain trafficking networks.
Dr. Petrova's voice crackled through the weak signal.
Be extremely careful. These traps are designed to be lethal.
Jack's rescue strategy evolved in stages. First, he needed to create a safe environment. The Siberian wilderness was unforgiving. Temperatures could drop rapidly, and predators could be attracted by the injured tiger's vulnerability. He used his emergency thermal blanket to create a wind barrier, positioning it to provide maximum protection. Medical intervention would be complex. The tiger's leg wound required immediate attention, but traditional veterinary procedures were impossible in this remote location. Jack would need to use his limited medical supplies strategically, cleaning the wound, preventing infection, and providing temporary stabilization. His emergency kit contained specialized wildlife medical supplies, antiseptic solutions designed for large predators, hemostatic agents to control bleeding, and broad-spectrum antibiotics. each item would be crucial in preventing the tiger from developing life-threatening complications. The psychological component of the rescue was equally important. Jack knew that an injured predator could become unpredictable. One wrong move could transform this potential rescue into a fatal encounter. He needed to communicate safety, to demonstrate that his intentions were protective. Hours passed as Jack meticulously planned each step. He used branches to create a protective perimeter, positioned his equipment for quick access, and continuously monitored the tiger's condition. The animal's breathing remained steady, a positive sign that suggested the injury, while serious, might not be immediately life-threatening. As night approached, Jack realized the rescue would be a multi-stage process. He couldn't simply remove the trap. Doing so without proper medical support could cause more damage. He would need to stabilize the tiger, create a safe transport mechanism, and get the animal to professional medical care. The wilderness around them seemed to hold its breath. Jack knew that every decision in the next few hours would determine whether this magnificent creature would survive. His rescue strategy was more than a technical procedure. It was a delicate dance of medical expertise, animal psychology, and pure human compassion. The tiger watched him, its eyes reflecting a complex mixture of pain, vulnerability, and an almost human-like understanding. This was no ordinary rescue. This was a moment that would challenge everything Jack understood about human-animal interaction, about survival, and about the profound connections that exist in the natural world. The rescue was just the beginning. Jack's decision to save the tiger transformed from a wilderness emergency into a complex, life-altering journey that would challenge everything he understood about wildlife conservation and human connection. After carefully transporting the injured tiger to the nearest wildlife rehabilitation center in Vladivostok, Jack discovered the animal was a rare Siberian tiger, a critically endangered species with fewer than 500 remaining in the wild. Dr. Elena Petrova confirmed the tiger was a male, approximately 6 years old, with a distinctive genetic marker indicating he was from a unique bloodline. The medical team worked tirelessly. Multiple surgeries were required to repair the extensive damage from the poacher's trap. Jack stayed throughout the entire process, his research background allowing him unprecedented access to the tiger's treatment. The veterinary team was astonished by the animal's resilience and Jack's commitment. Weeks of rehabilitation followed. Jack documented every stage of recovery, his scientific curiosity blending with a growing emotional connection to the animal. The tiger, which researchers began calling
Sokol,
meaning
falcon,
in Russian, showed remarkable healing progress. Unexpected complications arose when Jack's documentation revealed something more sinister. The trap that injured Sokol was part of a larger illegal wildlife trafficking network operating in the Siberian wilderness. His research and photographs became critical evidence for international conservation authorities. Local authorities became involved. Jack's detailed records provided unprecedented insight into poaching methods in the region. What started as a wilderness rescue was transforming into a significant investigation that could potentially disrupt an entire illegal wildlife trade operation. The rehabilitation center became a temporary home for Sokol. Jack's continuous presence and documentation attracted international attention. Wildlife conservation journals began requesting his comprehensive report, recognizing the unique nature of this rescue and subsequent investigation. Sokol's recovery became symbolic. Each milestone represented not just an individual animal's survival, but a broader narrative about human intervention in protecting endangered species. Jack found himself at the center of a story much larger than a single rescue. 3 months after the initial encounter, Sokol was declared medically fit for potential release. However, the trauma and injuries meant he might never survive completely independently in the wild. The rehabilitation team faced a critical decision about his future. Jack's connection with Sokol had become more than professional. The tiger seemed to recognize him, displaying a level of trust that defied typical human-animal interactions. Veterinary psychologists were fascinated by their unique bond, documenting every interaction for potential research. The story of their encounter began spreading internationally. Conservation groups, wildlife documentaries, and scientific publications sought to understand this extraordinary relationship between a researcher and an injured tiger. As release discussions continued, Jack realized his life had irrevocably changed. What began as a chance wilderness encounter had become a mission to protect, understand, and advocate for these magnificent creatures facing extinction. The aftermath of the rescue was just the beginning of a much larger journey, one that would challenge human understanding of wildlife conservation, interspecies communication, and the profound connections that exist beyond traditional boundaries. The unexpected consequences of Jack's tiger rescue began to unfold in ways he could never have anticipated. What seemed like a straightforward wildlife intervention quickly spiraled into a complex web of international intrigue, personal transformation, and ecological revelation. Within weeks of Sokol's rehabilitation, Jack received his first threatening communication. An unmarked envelope arrived at his research institute containing photographs of himself from the wilderness rescue, with cryptic annotations suggesting he had inadvertently disrupted something far more significant than a simple poaching operation. His detailed documentation of Sokol's rescue and rehabilitation had caught the attention of multiple stakeholders. Russian wildlife conservation authorities were initially supportive, but their enthusiasm began to wane as Jack's research started revealing deeper, more systemic issues within the region's wildlife management infrastructure. Dmitry Volkov, a powerful local businessman with connections to regional government, became particularly interested in Jack's work. Through intermediaries, Volkov attempted to purchase Jack's research documentation and photographic evidence, offering substantial financial compensation. Jack's refusal was immediate and unequivocal. The research institute where Jack worked began experiencing unusual pressures. Grant funding became complicated. External review committees started asking increasingly pointed questions about the tiger rescue documentation. Jack realized he had unknowingly stepped into a much larger, more dangerous arena. International wildlife trafficking networks operate with sophisticated communication and intimidation strategies. Jack discovered that Sokol's rescue had disrupted a carefully orchestrated smuggling route that had been operational for years. His meticulous documentation provided unprecedented insight into their methods. Interpol's Wildlife Crime Division became quietly interested. An agent named Maria Rodriguez made discreet contact with Jack, expressing keen interest in his comprehensive research. She revealed that Sokol's rescue had potentially exposed a network responsible for trafficking not just tigers, but multiple endangered species across eastern Russia and northeast Asia. Personal consequences emerged simultaneously. Jack's relationship with his long-term partner, Sarah, became strained. She viewed his increasing obsession with Sokol's story and the subsequent investigation as potentially dangerous. Their once stable relationship began showing significant fractures. Academic circles became divided. Some researchers celebrated Jack's groundbreaking work, while others viewed his approach as reckless and potentially compromising established research protocols. Professional reputation became a delicate balancing act. Financial pressures mounted. Legal consultations became frequent as Jack navigated the complex landscape of wildlife documentation and potential legal challenges. His personal savings were gradually depleted by research continuation and protective measures. Sokol's Rehabilitation Center became an unexpected focal point. International media began showing interest, with documentarians and wildlife journalists seeking exclusive access. The tiger became a symbol of resilience, with Jack emerging as an unlikely hero in conservation circles. Genetic testing of Sokol revealed something extraordinary. The tiger carried genetic markers, suggesting he was part of an isolated population with unique adaptational characteristics. This discovery transformed the rescue from a personal mission to a potentially groundbreaking scientific investigation. Local indigenous communities became unexpectedly involved. Traditional knowledge keepers from Siberian regions contacted Jack, sharing generational stories about tiger migrations and ecological patterns that aligned remarkably with his research findings. Technological challenges emerged. Jack's digital communications became targets of sophisticated cyber intrusions. Multiple attempts to compromise his research documentation suggested that powerful entities wanted his work suppressed. Personal security became a genuine concern. Anonymous warnings, subtle surveillance, and indirect threats became part of Jack's new reality. He began taking precautionary measures, working with security consultants to protect himself and his research. The tiger's story had transformed from a singular rescue into a complex narrative about ecological preservation, human intervention, and the intricate relationships between wildlife, local communities, and global economic systems. As months passed, Jack realized that Sokal's rescue was never just about saving one animal. It had become a pivotal moment in understanding broader ecological and human dynamics, challenging established narratives about wildlife conservation and human-animal interactions. The unexpected consequences continued unfolding, each revelation more complex and profound than the previous one, promising a journey far beyond what Jack could have ever imagined during that initial wilderness encounter. Life-changing revelations. The final pieces of the complex puzzle began to fall into place on a crisp autumn morning when Jack received an encrypted communication that would fundamentally alter everything he understood about Sokal's rescue and his own life's trajectory. Dr. Elena Petrova, a renowned Russian wildlife geneticist, arrived unexpectedly at Jack's research facility. Her presence carried an air of urgency and secrecy that immediately set Jack on edge. She carried a thick portfolio of documents and genetic research that would challenge everything Jack believed he knew about Sokal and the broader ecological landscape.
Your rescue was never just about one tiger.
Eleanor began, her piercing blue eyes scanning the research facility.
Sokal represents something far more significant, a genetic anomaly that could rewrite our understanding of Siberian tiger populations.
The genetic markers found in Sokal's DNA revealed a startling discovery. This particular tiger carried genetic characteristics that suggested a unique adaptation mechanism, a potential evolutionary response to extreme environmental changes. The implications were profound. Sokal wasn't just a survivor, he was potentially a key to understanding how certain animal species might adapt to rapidly changing global ecosystems. Jack learned that Sokal's lineage traced back to a small, isolated population of tigers that had survived in a microclimate region previously unknown to scientific research. This discovery challenged existing theories about tiger migration, survival strategies, and genetic diversity. But the revelations went deeper. Elena's research suggested that the tiger's unique genetic profile had attracted significant attention from multiple international organizations, some with scientific intentions, others with more nefarious economic motivations. Dmitry Volkov, the businessman who had previously attempted to purchase Jack's research, was revealed to be part of a complex network involving illegal wildlife trading, pharmaceutical research, and government-level ecological manipulation. Sokal's genetic profile represented a potential goldmine of scientific and economic value. The pharmaceutical angle was particularly intriguing. Certain genetic markers in Sokal's DNA showed remarkable potential for understanding adaptive immune responses. Pharmaceutical companies would pay astronomical sums for research that could potentially unlock new treatment methodologies for human diseases. Jack's personal history became unexpectedly intertwined with the investigation. Elena revealed that his own family background, particularly his maternal lineage, had unexpected connections to ecological research in eastern Russia. His grandmother, it turned out, had been a pioneering wildlife researcher whose work had been mysteriously suppressed decades earlier. Interpol's Maria Rodriguez provided additional context. The investigation had uncovered a decades-long conspiracy involving multiple government agencies, pharmaceutical corporations, and underground wildlife trafficking networks. Sokal's rescue was a critical moment that had begun unraveling this complex web. The personal cost of this revelation was significant. Jack's relationship with Sarah completely disintegrated. She viewed his increasing involvement as dangerous and obsessive. Their decade-long partnership crumbled under the weight of his commitment to the research. financial and professional challenges emerged simultaneously. While some academic institutions celebrated Jack's groundbreaking research, others viewed him with suspicion. Funding became increasingly complicated, with multiple research grants suddenly becoming contingent upon complex political negotiations. Local indigenous communities played a crucial role in corroborating the research. Traditional knowledge keepers from Siberian regions provided historical context that aligned perfectly with the genetic discoveries. Their oral histories, previously dismissed as folklore, now emerged as critical scientific documentation. Technological challenges became increasingly complex. Sophisticated cyber attacks targeted Jack's research documentation. Multiple attempts to compromise his digital archive suggested that powerful entities wanted the information suppressed. The ecological implications extended far beyond a single tiger's rescue. Sokal's genetic profile suggested potential adaptation strategies for species facing extreme environmental challenges. Climate scientists became intensely interested in the research, seeing it as a potential blueprint for understanding species survival mechanisms. Personal security became a critical concern. Jack began working with specialized security consultants, understanding that the information he now possessed could be dangerous in the wrong hands. Anonymous warnings and subtle surveillance became part of his new reality. As the investigation deepened, Jack realized that Sokal's rescue was never just about saving one animal. It had become a pivotal moment in understanding complex ecological systems, human intervention, and the delicate balance between scientific discovery and economic exploitation. The life-changing revelations continued to unfold, each discovery more profound and complex than the previous one. Jack had transformed from a wildlife researcher to a key figure in a global ecological narrative that would challenge existing scientific understanding. What began as a simple wilderness rescue had become a journey of scientific discovery, personal transformation, and a profound understanding of the intricate connections between human intervention and natural survival mechanisms. The story of Sokal was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. Final resolution and impact. 3 years after the initial rescue, Jack stood at the United Nations Environmental Summit in Geneva, presenting groundbreaking research that would fundamentally reshape global conservation strategies. The journey from a chance wilderness encounter to this moment had been nothing short of extraordinary. Sokal, the tiger whose rescue had started everything, had become a symbol of resilience and scientific breakthrough. The genetic research derived from his unique DNA had already led to 3 revolutionary medical treatments, one for adaptive immune responses in extreme environments, another for understanding genetic mutation patterns, and a third related to cellular regeneration. The pharmaceutical breakthrough came from an unexpected collaboration between Jack's research team and Dr. Elena Petrova's institute in Moscow. They had developed a treatment protocol that showed remarkable potential in treating rare genetic disorders, particularly those affecting populations living in extreme climatic conditions. International legal proceedings against Dmitry Volkov and his network of wildlife traffickers had been complex and protracted. Multiple governments, including Russia, China, and the United States, had been involved in a massive investigation that exposed a global network of illegal wildlife trading and scientific exploitation. Jack's personal life had transformed dramatically. His relationship with Sarah had ended, but he had found a new partnership with Maria Rodriguez, the Interpol investigator who had been instrumental in uncovering the broader conspiracy surrounding Sokal's rescue. They now work together, bridging law enforcement and scientific research. The indigenous communities of Siberia played a crucial role in the final resolution. Their traditional knowledge, which had been marginalized for decades, was now recognized as a critical component of ecological understanding. A new international research protocol was established, ensuring that indigenous communities would be active participants and primary beneficiaries of ecological research. Technological innovations emerged from the research. A new satellite tracking system was developed, allowing for more precise monitoring of endangered species migration patterns. This system was a direct result of the genetic and ecological insights gained from studying Sokol's unique genetic profile. Economic impacts were significant. Several major pharmaceutical companies restructured their research approaches, moving away from exploitative models to more collaborative and ethical research methodologies. The financial model of scientific research underwent a fundamental transformation. Climate change research received an unexpected boost. Sokol's genetic markers provided insights into how species might adapt to rapidly changing environmental conditions. This became a critical area of study for scientists worldwide, offering new hope for understanding and potentially mitigating the impacts of global environmental changes. Jack established the Sokol Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to protecting endangered species and supporting innovative ecological research. The foundation became a global platform for collaborative scientific efforts, bringing together researchers, indigenous communities, and conservation experts. Legal frameworks underwent significant changes. New international treaties were drafted, providing stronger protections for wildlife and establishing more rigorous protocols for scientific research involving endangered species. The Sokol case became a landmark example of how individual action could drive systemic change. Educational initiatives emerged from the research. Universities around the world began developing new interdisciplinary programs that combined ecological research, genetic studies, and indigenous knowledge systems. Jack became a visiting professor at multiple institutions, sharing the comprehensive lessons learned from Sokol's story. The psychological impact of the research was profound. It challenged existing narratives about human-animal interactions, demonstrating the complex communication and mutual understanding possible between species. Jack's initial wilderness encounter was now studied as a case of interspecies communication and survival. Environmental policy underwent a radical transformation. Governments began implementing more holistic approaches to conservation, moving beyond traditional protection models to more dynamic, adaptive strategies. The insights gained from Sokol's research provided a new framework for understanding ecological systems. Personal redemption played a significant role in the final resolution. Dmitry Volkov, facing extensive legal charges, ultimately cooperated with international authorities. His testimony revealed extensive networks of illegal wildlife trading and scientific exploitation, leading to multiple high-profile arrests and systemic changes. The media narrative around wildlife conservation shifted dramatically. What was once seen as a niche scientific concern became a mainstream global discussion. Sokol's story was documented in multiple languages, becoming a global symbol of hope, resilience, and the potential for positive change. Technological companies became increasingly involved in conservation efforts. Advanced AI and machine learning technologies were developed to support wildlife tracking, genetic research, and ecological monitoring. The interdisciplinary approach became the new standard in scientific research. Jack's personal journey became a testament to the power of individual action. From a chance wilderness encounter to a global scientific movement, his story inspired a new generation of researchers, conservationists, and environmental activists. The final resolution was not just about one tiger's rescue. It was about reimagining the relationship between humans and the natural world. Sokol had become more than an individual animal. He was a catalyst for global change, a symbol of hope, and a reminder of the extraordinary connections that exist in our complex ecosystem. As Jack concluded his presentation at the UN summit, the audience rose in a standing ovation. The journey that began with a wounded tiger in a remote wilderness had transformed into a global movement of scientific discovery, ecological understanding, and human compassion. The story of Sokol was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning to unfold.